Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt. Happy Hanukkah.
That's right. Welcome to the
Uh,
DMZ, everyone. Our special holiday. The holiday season is upon us.
that's right. We in our a religious yet culturally diverse household. We've lit our menorah. We've chopped down our Christmas tree. I've done the annual pilgrimage to Ashfield, Massachusetts, where I take out my trusty saw and chop one down myself. Have you gotten your traditional hand-delivered Christmas tree yet this year?
Yeah, it's beautiful. We had a great tree this year, which we order on the internet and comes to our house in a box. It's a real tree, and it's big. It's really big and beautiful. I would say maybe the best Christmas tree we've ever had.
Now you have to give them dimensions. I assume you don't get surprised how big or small the tree is.
Yeah, it's within give or take like 6 inches or something. But it's amazing that what's amazing to me is that, it's not, it's not the length of the tree. I mean, obviously the length of the tree is the length of the tree. You can't get a box that's smaller than the length of the tree, but in terms of the girth of the tree, it comes in a box that's like this, they basically fold all the branches up into a very surprisingly thin box, and then when you open it, the branches all come out, and it's a huge tree. I'm amazed at their ingenuity.
Congratulations on your find. So it is. We've got an early presidential primary Christmas gift in the semi-quasi announcement of Jeb Bush's non-candidacy. I take it this is roiling the waters in Beltway Republican circles. Is that fair to say?
I would say in all Republican circles. It's it gives us something to talk about. This is the horse race story of the week, I think, to talk about. I think it probably does push other candidates to expedite their decisions and their announcements. It certainly opens them up to attacks and criticism from some on the right. So it was a little early Christmas gift, I think, for all of us who do this stuff.
Now, I think it was Ben Smith at BuzzFeed that had a piece back in April that said why Jeb Bush is a terrible candidate. Yet, in the Marist poll that came out earlier this week, just before Jeb's announcement, Romney was at 19% and Jeb was in second at 14%. None of those are gangbuster numbers, but they beat the hell out of Rand Paul at 5% and Ted Cruz at 4%. Are the pundits wrong here that Jeb is sort of out of his league? DOA, can't get past the Bush name, out of step with the Tea Party, no room to maneuver, or do you see daylight for him?
I'd say both. I mean, I think that you can make a really good argument that he has a ton of problems to overcome, and I think you can make a really good argument that he has a lot of benefits and advantages, that speak well of his chances. So I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, you mentioned the Bush name. That's problematic on several counts. You've got the dynasty problem, and then you frankly just got the George W. Bush problem. And how does he? What is Jeb Bush's foreign policy? Will he distance himself, rebuke, or embrace the Bush foreign policy? You've got the things like Common Core and immigration reform, issues that he's championed that are not going to play well at all among the conservative base. On the other hand, you've got the thing where this is a two-term governor of Florida who was a darn conservative and by, I think, most accounts, a very good governor. I think most people think that he was a smarter and more prepared Bush, that if he hadn't lost to Lawton Chiles in 1994, that he would have been president, that he would have governed much more like his father than his brother. And is it really fair to hold the sins of the brother against Jeb? I mean, I think that it's really a mixed bag. He brings a lot to the table, and there's a lot of baggage as well.
Yeah, I don't personally see the Bush name being a problem for him. I don't see what's so hard for him to say, I agree with my brother on this, I don't agree with him on that. The Iraq War didn't work out well. I think some of the bailouts were a bad idea. I don't know what position he's going to take, but I mean, he could, every time he says one thing that is different from his brother, he'll get a ton of play, and he'll be seen as his own man. I mean, so that to me is not the hard part. The hard part, I would imagine, in the Republican primary is saying he would have accepted a compromise that involves tax increases, saying that he wants a pathway to citizenship, saying that he wants, Common Core is becoming a toxic word in Tea Party circles. That stuff strikes me as the heavier burdens to carry. But I thought, I'm sure I said it to you 4 years ago, that Mitt Romney can't be the nominee because if Romney cared, obviously he could. So there's a longer history of established Republicans getting the nomination than Tea Party conservatives.
I think Bush, if Bush can survive the primary as Romney survived, I think he would be much better poised to be a general election candidate than Romney was. Because I don't think he's going to remember how Romney demagogued the immigration issue, attacked Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich over it, and talked about self-deportation. Jeb's not going to do that. I mean, I think he'd rather lose than do that, and that's part of his problem. Does he have the fire in the belly? Is he willing to do what it takes to win? But I think it's also a benefit because, as he said, you have to lose the primary to win the general. If he does emerge as the nominee, I think he'd be a much stronger candidate than Mitt Romney, and so
you're drifting to some serious rhino territory, Matt. You are embracing the squishes. You're saying only the establishments can win. The Tea Partiers have no chance. You're gonna.
I'm not saying that. You're putting words in my mouth. No, but I am saying I'm not saying that, and I'm not rooting for Jeb or any of them for that matter. But what I am saying is, I think that Jeb would be better positioned than Romney, and I think that Jeb could. I think Jeb can win the nomination, and I think Jeb can win the presidency. But I think that I think Cruz could win the nomination and win the presidency. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think that's crazy, but I think he could. So, I mean, I really do think it's a wide open jump ball right now.
Now, you've often talked about the Republican primary in terms of brackets, like NCAA tournament brackets. There's an establishment bracket, and there's a Tea Party bracket. So essentially, the establishment folks are fighting amongst each other, and the Tea Party folks are fighting amongst each other to be the top of their own packs, and then you can go mano a mano, towards the end. Does Jeb making this early move? Does he knock some lower seeds out of the box right away? I mean, is there just no oxygen now for Marco Rubio? Is there no oxygen for Mitt Romney? Is there no oxygen for Chris Christie? Or are those folks going to jump in sued now and say, look, Jeb Bush is no 800-pound gorilla. I need to show that I can stand up to this guy.
I think there's so many variables involved. I mean, one, somebody could get in thinking, well, maybe Jeb doesn't really run, or maybe Jeb implodes, and we'll see. So the fact that he's sort of announced this exploratory effort doesn't necessarily mean that much. Now, if he starts racking up a ton of money early and really sending signals that he's really serious, and if he starts getting traction, I think that there are repercussions. I think this probably keeps Romney out of the race, not so much because Romney is scared of Jeb, but frankly because I think Romney was already going to be a reluctant candidate if he was even going to consider. He was going to have to essentially be drafted. He was going to get in late. He was going to be sort of the savior if there was this clown car campaign and he was the only, So I think this probably does keep Romney out. I think that Rubio, whether Rubio runs or not, yesterday they put out a statement saying that this didn't impact their decision. Well, it may not impact their decision, but it really impacts Rubio's chances. Rubio was a Bush protege in the Florida State House, and all the Florida money is going to go to Jeb. and Rubio was their second choice. So this is severely damaging to Rubio's chances. Now maybe he gets in anyway to see, does Jeb flounder, does Jeb really run or not, and then if it doesn't go well for Marco, he gets out in time to run for re-election. I mean, so many of these different variables could happen, but this is very damaging to Rubio's chances of becoming president. So I think Christie, here's the interesting thing too, is that in the past we've had this scenario where there's been like one establishment candidate, like one Mitt Romney, one John McCain, and the others were cast as sort of the conservative alternatives, and they would split the vote. So then the establishment candidate would end up emerging. But if Jeb runs and Christie runs, and then let's say Mike Pence and Scott Walker run, it gets a little confusing. It's a little less clear cut. And so the possibility of the conservatives splitting the vote and Jeb just sort of waltzing down the middle, having the establishment money and support all to himself, maybe not that clear cut. So I think Jeb is well positioned, but it's not, nobody's going to preordain this.
You think some of the governors out there will straddle these camps?
I mean, I think that people like Jindal and I think certainly Pence and Walker can sort of have one foot in the conservative camp and one foot in the establishment camp, and then I think Christie, could give Jeb a run for his money.
Now Rick Perry's out there too. He's doing some media tours. He was asked by MSNBC, "Do you have to be smart to be president?" And he said the president's not an IQ test. Is he being taken seriously in Republican? He's not doing very well in the polls. I mean, the last poll I saw had all, the top of the pack was Romney, Jeb. Then you had Huckabee and Christie at 9. And then you had Ben Carson at 8. Is Rick Perry not a serious player anymore, or does he have some chance to come back?
Well, I think he has a chance. I mean, a lot of us were very hopeful that, in 2012 he was going to be sort of a rise as the serious conservative alternative to Mitt Romney. That he would have the gravitas and the charisma. And by virtue of being, I think at the time the longest-serving governor in America, from obviously a very big state, that he was going to be sort of the big alternative to Romney. And his campaign was a disaster. Obviously, it completely fell apart. And so now I think his reputation took a major setback. I don't think he is now starts the race, being considered like a front runner, or like the establishment favorite. But again, I mean, if he gets off to a very good start, raises a lot of money, has some really good debate performances, which I think would assuage some of the concerns about him, then I think he has a chance to also kind of, be in the mix. I wouldn't completely write him off, and I think he would also straddle the conservative and establishment, wings.
Now, one thing that struck me out of this Marist poll that came out, and granted it's just one poll, at the end of September, the poll had Rand Paul near the top at 13%. But and that poll did not include Mike Huckabee or Ben Carson. The one that came out this week included Huckabee and Carson. Huckabee was at 9, Carson was 8, and Rand Paul tumbles from 13 to 5. Now down with the rest of all the also Rands. I mean, that sort of suggested to me that we had mused in the past, whether Rand would have the potential to consolidate the Tea Party base while the establishment splintered. It seems like Rand is in nowhere near a position where he's consolidating anything, and right. His base seems actually to be pretty narrow and soft.
Well, I think the big story is nobody's in any position to consolidate anything. None of them are. None of them can lock down their bracket right now.
But what does it mean that a guy like Ben Carson, who is completely implausible. He's just not, with zero experience in government, basically gave one speech where he embarrassed the president on Obamacare at a national prayer breakfast. Otherwise, has done nothing of any import in regards to governing. Perfectly, obviously, very impressive neurosurgeon, but that's not governing. That he can just sort of waltz in there on a cut rate infomercial that Armstrong Williams produced and score 8% and drive Rand Paul to low single digits. I mean, is that clown card dynamic? Has that not abated since the embarrassments of Herman Cain and Michelle Bachmann in 2012?
Well, look, Bill, I think it's a real problem. I'm writing a book right now about this sort of stuff, and you've been helping me out with that, helping edit it and look at it and stuff. So this fits into the little section that I have currently titled "The Death of Experience," and I think it's really problematic for conservatives that is a philosophy that should put some emphasis on people being experienced, having prudence and wisdom. That he would be vaulted to the top of some of these polls. I mean, obviously, Dr. Carson's an incredibly smart person, obviously an accomplished neurosurgeon, but I don't think he's ever been elected to anything. And perhaps he should be a little humble when it comes to entering politics. I'd love to see him run for Congress, I think it would be pretty ambitious to even run for the U.S. Senate, having never been elected to anything. But that happens, and do that. Learn a little bit about politics, pay your dues a little bit, and then maybe run for president. But I think this speaks to something indicative in our sort of our culture today. It's almost like a get-rich-quick mentality. It's the thing where an intern shows up and doesn't pay his dues and starts telling the boss how the job's done. It's the thing where RG3 shows up, and instead of carrying a clipboard for 2 or 3 years and getting hazed, he immediately starts doing Subway commercials, and people think he's a rock star, and then he sort of flames out. Why? Because, it might have been beneficial to him to actually have to pay his dues, to actually learn a little bit about how things work, and to be told to shut up from time to time while he gains experience. And so I think this is part of our culture. I think it's probably, sadly, a little more indicative of the state of the right at this current moment. But I think it's incredibly damaging. Ben Carson could be really doing some great work for conservatism. He's got a great resume. I think he's a great spokesman. But running for president is the absolute last thing I would recommend that he do.
And could that just bolster Jeb? I mean, there's going to be all this consternation on the right that Jeb is a rhino, that it's another failed moderate. It's going to lose the way Romney and McCain did. Which seems to absolve conservatives of whatever messages they foisted upon those two to adopt. But put that aside. If people like Carson and Huckabee are dominating the Tea Party bracket and not someone perhaps more accomplished than, say, a governor like Walker or Perry or Pence, is that just a foil for Jeb Bush to play off on? Look, you might have problems with me, but your choices are these guys, people who are completely, unqualified for the job. So, pick your poison.
Absolutely. And I think not only is it something he could use from a messaging standpoint, but just from a pure outcome-based aspect. I mean, look, there's too many variables, but you sort of game it out if assuming everyone like that were to run. So you go into Iowa, let's say Santorum or Huckabee, win Iowa, and then Carson and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz all are sort of splitting the conservative vote. I mean, you could see Jeb coming in second. I don't know, maybe in Iowa, and then you go to New Hampshire, and maybe Jeb wins New Hampshire, and South Carolina goes establishment most of the time. People always think of South Carolina, the Deep South, but actually,
McCain won South Carolina,
right.
But Gingrich won South Carolina. Romney had to stand after that.
Well, in Michael Lewis's book Losers, I think it's Michael Lewis who wrote that book.
Right.
In the book Losers, there's a theory.
The hardcover is called Trail Fever, by the way. It was the paperback that was called Losers.
Right. I like Losers better personally. In that book, he he hypothesizes that because of the citadels there and the military background, that they fall in line. That's their ethos, that they fall in line, that they sort of respect authority and fall in line behind the establishment candidate. That's, as I recall, that's Michael Lewis's theory,
right?
For why South
when
Carolina.
McCain won there, I mean, he won. I think it was a 33%. I mean, he won a pretty thin plurality, but that conservative base had splintered. I mean, you could have beaten McCain one-on-one with a conservative with broader support. And Gingrich was not a falling in line vote. You know, that was trying to upset Romney's momentum coming out of New Hampshire. Right.
Well, I think the Michael. When was the losers? What?
Well, it was about the '96 race.
That was it. Okay, so that was about '96. So McCain wasn't even running. That was Dole
and Buchanan.
Dole won South Carolina,
right.
and McCain was campaigning for Dole. But anyway, be that as it, take that for what it's worth. But
right.
You could see maybe Jeb wins South Carolina because the others, split the vote or whatever. I mean, yeah, and then you go to Florida. I mean, I'm talking about the big races. Obviously, we've got like Delaware in there somewhere and whatnot. But then you go to Florida, and Jeb wins Florida. I think we can pretty much agree on that. And then it's game over, right?
Well, Florida usually happens. I don't know what the new Republican schedule is. If Florida's on Super Tuesday, if there's a Super Tuesday soon after that. I mean, when you're at your home state, you tend not to get you get delegates out of it. Obviously, and Florida's going to have a lot of delegates, but you tend not to get the same kind of media bump because it's sort of presumed no one really contests you there. I think the question for the Republicans is if Jeb is sort of racking up some early victories, is there a buyer's remorse that allows a conservative to come in and upset his momentum? And if that can be a consolidated conservative, would that be fatal for Jeb? Or is it going to be like it is in the past where they really just can't get their act together? With Romney, with Santorum and Gingrich are kind of swapping victories, and neither one can really piece it all together. And Romney is able to win, even though he doesn't have the deepest level of support in the party.
I think the other variable too is, people like Rand Paul and Rubio that would presumably want to get on the Senate ballot. I think Rand has to get out of the presidential race by a certain date if he's going to be on the.
Well, he's trying to change the law there so it becomes a caucus and not a primary, and that would give him a loophole where he wouldn't have to get off of the Senate ballot.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I think the Kentucky would still has to pass that law. It's not done yet.
Well, anyway, that's. I mean, my point is only to say that there are numerous factors and variables involved in this. But while I'm not rooting for Jeb, while I'm not predicting he will win, I do think that the people who say he doesn't have a chance and that the name's going to drag him down, and the fact that he hasn't, the fact that he hasn't run in a long time, I think he's a formidable candidate. You definitely have to take him seriously.
Now, these headlines just broke before we started taping, and I haven't really read any long stories about it, so I don't have any grand insights. But there is this Cuba deal that just has been announced, where we've swapped some prisoners, and from what I've gleaned, that there's talk that's going to be a precursor to some broader normalizing of relations with Cuba, or at least talks to that end. This has always been a third rail of Florida politics with that strong Cuban community of Cuban refugees, but there's also been some talk that the younger generation of Cubans, the sons and daughters of those that fled Castro, don't have the same attitude about their ancestral country and want to see more family ties, more exchanges, more remittances, and the like. How do you think both Jeb and Rubio are going to react to this, or how should they react to this?
Well, I guess first, just to talk substantively, I mean, for those of us who want to see the fall of the Castro regime, one could certainly argue that that opening up Cuba would do more. That what we've been doing has not. It has led to poverty in Cuba. It has not led to the collapse of the Castro regime. So one could be a hawk and an anti-communist, and one could argue that doing this, changing our strategy, might be the way to go if you actually want communism to fall and to open up. Having said that, I think that you're right about this being the third rail. I mean, this news just broke, so please forgive us if our insight isn't as good as it should be, or if we're not up to speed on all the breaking news. But my guess is that people like everyone from Senator Menendez to Senator Rubio to Jeb Bush to all of the Cuban American members of Congress. Essentially, I would say they will unanimously probably oppose this. That they will say this is a bad. They will say this is a bad thing, and that they will say that this is sort of giving in to the Castro regime. And I think we just have to wait and see what happens. I think hopefully we all want the same thing. We want the country to be Cuba Libre. We want the country to be free. We want the Castros to be done. I personally hope that it doesn't go back to becoming like a playground of the rich with like casinos, dominating. But certainly freedom and prosperity brought to that island nation. So I definitely think it becomes a political issue. I definitely think it becomes a campaign issue. My guess is all Cuban American politicians will be against this. I think part of Obama's rationale, if there's a political rationale, is that Cubans are becoming less important, just demographically. That he's not terribly worried about offending or losing them, and that the ones that are going to be most offended by this are going to tend to be older, not so much millennial era Cuban Americans who don't really have direct roots to the country. I think it'll be interesting too if there's a sense that Obama, by doing this, is acting unilaterally. That this is the kind of thing that this is another example of like his immigration orders of him doing things that are very serious without the consultation of members of Congress. So that's my immediate gut. Those are my immediate thoughts without knowing very much at all about this story.
Now, while there is so much activity happening on the Republican side of the 2016 ledger, there's also been a burst of Elizabeth Warren talk. Still folks trying to entice her into a primary against Hillary Clinton. She gave a blistering speech on the Senate floor regarding the Dodd-Frank provision in the bill that kept the government open, where she, looking at Citigroup, said, Dodd-Frank should have broken you into pieces. It's probably some of the more hotter rhetoric coming out of her since she became a senator. Move On has now said we're going to put $1 million into a draft Warren effort, and Democracy for America, which is the group that Howard Dean founded, now run by his brother, is joining in on that. Whereas Howard Dean himself wrote an op-ed for Politico magazine saying, "I'm ready for Hillary." And Al Franken, who is considered sort of one of the more populist liberal senators, he ran a pretty populist campaign to win re-election this past fall, told MSNBC that he's ready for Hillary as well. So you're seeing, I don't know if this is the invisible hand of the Nathan Hillary campaign pushing them to make these things, so Warren doesn't pick up too much steam. But some of that division on the left is evident. Although in the polls, you still see Hillary Clinton, run away with it. Still over 60%. Warren is in the low teens, I believe. And Bernie Sanders and Jim Webb and Martin O'Malley are still barely registering a blip, and those are the three that might actually take the plunge, who are actually doing things to run. Warren is still saying up and down that she's not even running. So there's a question whether we're going to have a real contest here. But even if we don't, is she exposing a level of discontent on the left with Hillary and her closeness to Wall Street? I would suggest. The polling would suggest not. I mean, there's certainly that substantive division in the party over these questions of populism, but you still see a good chunk of what would you consider the left of the party being pretty comfortable with Hillary and not presuming she is a tool of Wall Street the way that some of the populists already do.
Look, I don't care what the polls say. I mean, there was a time when Hillary was destroying Barack Obama, I think even among African-American voters in polls. I think the polls are meaningless on this. I think if Elizabeth Warren gets in, she really could catch fire. I think Elizabeth Warren is the only threat that Hillary has in terms of getting the nomination, and I think she'd be an incredibly strong candidate. I think it's because, the whole saying, Bill, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Well, if that's true, then it should be Elizabeth Warren versus Jeb Bush, I guess, because Hillary is sort of the perfunctory, I think, default choice. Really, the only thing she has going for her is the fact that there would be history, the first woman president, but Elizabeth Warren really neutralizes that for obvious reasons. And Elizabeth Warren, people are passionate about, they're excited about. She actually believes in things. It would be a race about things. And so, I really do believe, and this isn't like me trolling the left trying to, start trouble, because who cares? I don't think Elizabeth Warren cares what I think. But I really do believe that if Elizabeth Warren gets in, she could win. I definitely still think she could win, and I think it matters nothing what the polls currently say about Hillary when it comes to Elizabeth Warren. The rest of them, they have no chance, barring some, collapse of Hillary Clinton, unforeseen collapse. But Martin O'Malley, Bernie Sanders, all these, Jim Webb could make things a little interesting in some of the places, but I think really Elizabeth Warren is the serious threat, and I'm not convinced she's not going to run. I still think that Elizabeth Warren.
I half agree with you. I do think Warren obviously poses the biggest threat, relatively speaking. She has the most fervent base of support. She has she has a good rap down. She's been honing this message now for several years, and she's laser focused on it. But that's also a strength and a weakness. Once you get into a presidential race, you got to go beyond your comfort zone. You got to now address all the issues in the world. And, she's not as expertly honed her message on foreign policy issues or social issues, other things that candidates get tripped on all the time. Even Hillary Clinton got tripped up on immigration, for someone who's been around the block several times in the 2008 primary. So on one hand, I see her having a bit of a hot hand. I also see, I think the polls now suggest a wider gap between, Hillary and Warren than you did Hillary and Obama at this same point. So I think the Hillary support is deeper than it was before, but your point is well taken, that polls can certainly change in a heartbeat. But if you're Warren, you got to ask yourself, where am I most influential? Am I more influential getting in the primary, forcing these issues onto the primary debate stage, but I'm still a pretty decent shot I'm going to get beat, and maybe beat very soundly. So is that going to strengthen or weaken my hand relative to staying in the Senate? And I got a plenty good bully pulpit where I am. I'm making some inroads in building a bipartisan coalition to restore Glass-Steagall. I've gotten David Vitter's support and McCain's support, and I think a couple others, trying to departisan that concept. And I've shown in this latest spending bill confrontation, I can get a good chunk of senators to come along with me on some of these things with not a whole lot of effort. And maybe I couldn't stop this one, but maybe some other deals down the line, maybe I can stop and show that I have real muscle. So I think she has to weigh those considerations.
Well, I agree, Bill. And no, I agree. There we go again. No, I agree with everything you said, but I would say this: if Elizabeth Warren is a really good person who solely cares about advancing her progressive politics and lacks ambition, then she stays in the Senate, because why create this turmoil? And you could certainly make a case that she could do a lot of good for her cause in the Senate, be a rock star there, possibly, help influence if Hillary wins, the direction that she would govern. And so I think not running would be a very sort of modest, humble thing to do, and you could argue very noble. However, if she has any ambition about being president, she has to do it now. She has to do it now for the same reason Barack Obama had to run when he did, because of a variety of reasons. Number one, unlike Obama, Elizabeth Warren is up in years. I think she's just a few months younger than Hillary Clinton. People assume, because she's a fresher, much fresher face, in terms of not having been in the public consciousness for 25 years, or at least 22 years or something. But Elizabeth Warren is, I think, almost as old as Hillary. Number two, the same thing that Obama realized is that lightning doesn't really strike twice. I mean, 4 years from now, 8 years from now, her moment may be gone. I mean, in the U.S. Senate, when you're voting on things, when you get sort of caught up in the Washington, what's the old story about somebody asked Bob Dole a question about, what are you going to do about this important issue? And he's like, I think that bill's in markup right now. You become like a senator. You get on the record voting for all of these controversial things. You get sucked into the jargon and the bureaucracy of Washington. So essentially, if Elizabeth Warren ever wants to be president of the United States, if there's a part of her that has that ambition, she must seize the day. This is her shot. These chances come around usually once in a lifetime. And I think in her case, it's especially true. She has to see, this is the Elizabeth Warren zeitgeist. This moment could pass her by, or she could seize the moment just like Barack Obama did. And that is going to be the real temptation for her. I don't think she can bide her time and say, well, let's wait 4 years, let's wait 8 years. For a variety of reasons, I think this is her moment. She either seizes the day, or maybe you could argue a more noble thing to do is to not do that. And maybe that is more honorable. But these are the realities. If I'm advising Elizabeth Warren, I'm saying, this is your shot. If you ever want to be president, now's the moment.
You've heard it from Matt. Sage advice from a helpful, constructive source, and not trying to troll at all. And I don't disagree with you. I do think if that's what she wants, this is the time to do it. I'm highly skeptical that's what she wants. I think what she wants is to restore Glass-Steagall. And I think she wants to build a coalition to that end, which and all the work that she has been doing has been towards that end. She has not been doing anything to prepare for a presidential.
Then she is one of the most honorable. I'm being serious. Yeah. If that, I made this. Actually, I agree with her on Glass-Steagall, but I disagree with her on a ton of stuff. But if she truly is there to do something and will not be tempted into this, then I think she deserves kudos, because that's sort of a profiling courage in a way.
Let's end it on that very DMZ note. We haven't figured out a holiday schedule yet, so I don't know when I will see you next, but we'll work that out soon enough.
We'll work that out. We'll work that out offline. But either way, rest assured, you'll either see us before the new year or you won't. But we will be back at some point in the near future, and maybe sooner rather than later. I'll have my people talk to your people and run it up the flagpole and see.
That's right.
All right.
In the meantime, happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. And, everyone, have a festive celebration. And we'll see you back here on the next DMZ.
Take care.